بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Dear friends, welcome to Idea Foundation Forum. Today we will discuss the research topic 6 major reasons of the Muslims' decadence. First is sectarianism. In the last lecture, we concluded perspective view of the Muslims' decadence by referring to 4 extremely painful and heart-smothering events just a few years after having the Islamic State of Medina reached to great heights of glory and religious reformation, unmatched in history of mankind. The first was imperialist empires of the Romans and the Persians were completely eliminated, smashed with the sacrifice of 4,000 and 8,500 Muslims respectively in the battles of Yarmouk and Al-Qadisiyah. While the Muslims' life losses at the battles of Jamal and Siffin, fought among the Muslims themselves, were more than 10,000 and 70,000 respectively. How painful it is. Second, 4 caliphs were martyred, killed by willful killings in a row within a span of 24 years, starting from 656 to 680 AD. Just imagine. Third, Islamic Caliphate. Islamic Caliphate in Arabic or in Urdu, Khilafat, had been torn apart, divided into 2 after the assassination of 3rd Caliph Hazrat Usman on June 17, 656 AD, while the state of Medina was divided in 3 states when Mukhtar Saqafi took over Kufa in October 685 by expelling its governor appointed by Abdullah bin Zubair, Caliph at Mecca. Second Caliph. Another Caliph was in Syria. Fourth, Kaaba, the house of Allah, has never been desecrated in the history of Islam by a non-Muslim's assault, but twice by the Muslims in 683 and 692 AD. These immediate signs of decadence and their continuity in the subsequent times causing failure in achieving the desired objectives set by the Islamic State of Medina need to be analyzed with an honest mindset to find out reasons credible enough to convince the Muslim Ummah for opening up a thought process for taking some dedicated remedial measures, corrective measures. In the previous lecture, 6 major reasons were identified as responsible factors for the Muslims' decadence. To refresh memory, I may repeat them. Listen. Number 1, sectarianism. Number 2, Ibadat lost the spirit of character building. Third, intellectual stagnation, ignoring the Qur'anic instructions. 4, non-inclusive attitudes. It is very important. 5, silent majorities. Their failure in identifying the enemy and fight them out. 6, failure in depicting the real face of Islam which teaches peace, human rights, etc. Today we will discuss the role of sectarianism in the Muslims' decadence in some detail. Dear friends, if we go through the Quranic references and annals of history, especially the horrific events we just mentioned, sectarianism appears as one the most significant reason of the Muslims' decadence. It has been weakening strength of the Muslims that would have been consolidated had the internal unity been preserved, been taken care of. This disunity has been providing opportunities to opponents of Islam to employ their strategy of divide and rule, to keep the Muslims' power fragmented, divided. Moreover, this disunity also made increasingly adverse effects, negative effects on other five major reasons of decadence. Sectarianism has not only been weakening the Muslims as a dominating power in the world, but is also sidelining Islam from the mainstream thought process of the modern life, as it happened in case of Christianity when state and religion were separated in the Christian world. Islam is being projected, is being propagated as a militant and orthodox religion devoid of values, empty of values that could preserve and promote human rights and civic life of modern democracies. Whereas the facts are totally opposite. Facts are totally opposite. All the Abrahamic religions, including Islam, were primarily based on the concept of Tawheed and well-being of the humanity, ensuring justice, equity, and order. Since these religions had been fighting against evil designs of devilish elites, the forces of evil maliciously, deceivingly divided the forces of the good by creating false religious differences among them. Thus, wars against the evil had been diffused, undermined by diverting people to nefariously designed religious disputes, mostly through covert means. Covert means hidden means. The Abrahamic mission reached its finality with the advent of Islam, with much more comprehensive and progressive scope, ensuring perfect response to the emerging human needs with a futuristic outlook, anti-classic in its spirit, anti-classic, growing, progressing, and universal in its coverage, outreach. It presented a socio-economic and politico-legalistic framework for the well-being of the whole mankind by pursuing the principles of faith, equity, justice, order, unity, and human rights. To sum up the divine message, to sum up the Abrahamic message, Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam delivered the farewell sermon in December 629 AD, laying down a foundation charter, a basic charter for the guidance of future Islamic states, with respect to governance, human rights, and larger humanitarian principles. In its spirit, it overshadows even the most modern protocols on human rights, a process initiated by the Magna Carta in 1215 AD. Every critic of Islam, this is challenge. Every critic of Islam must remember the Islamic principles of civil liberties, religious freedom, and protection of religious places of non-Muslims settled in the Umayyad Pact, reached between Hazrat Umar Raziyallahu Ta'ala anhu and Patriarch Sophronius in April 637 when the Muslims took over the city of Jerusalem. These standards got historic validity. It was not just on paper. It got validity when Hazrat Umar Farooq Raziyallahu Ta'ala anhu returned keys of the Holy Church to the Patriarch of Jerusalem and declined his offer to pray Zohar prayer in the church, fearing. Why? Fearing that accepting the invitation might endanger the church's independent status as a place of Christian worship. Just imagine. So, dear friends, despite all these golden principles and traditions of Islam, focus your attention. Despite all these golden principles and traditions of Islam, its opponents have much logical arguments to blame the Muslims of militancy and orthodoxy in view of socio-political and economic backwardness, internal strife, internal frictions based on religious divisions, and lacking democratic and inclusive values of the modern age in the Muslim societies. Every pitfall, failures cannot be attributed to the opponents, even if some of them can genuinely be attributed to them. Those must have been based on our own weaknesses. Here, with reference to today's discussion, sectarian division appears most prominent weakness that has been playing a heinous role in serving the opponent's strategies of divide and rule, or diffusing the Muslims' potential power against socio-economic injustice, disequilibrium, and oppressive rule being executed by the elitist forces. Thus, instead of raising fingers on the opponents, very important, instead of raising fingers on the opponents, we must carry out honest accountability of our own actions and attitudes in the light of Qur'anic directives and traditions of our Holy Prophet, especially the farewell sermon. It is the loss of focus on Allah and the Quran. Let me repeat. It is the loss of focus on Allah and the Quran that inculcated such weaknesses which pulled the Muslims into the quagmire of sectarianism, and thus they fell in the vicious circle of decadence. We have already discussed sectarianism and necessity of the Muslims' unity for well-being of the mankind with reference to Quranic directives in lectures 67 and 69. Kindly listen them again to understand the necessity of the Muslim unity for the survival and progress of Muslim world today. YouTube references are shown on the screen. Please have a look. So, dear friends, the Muslims, instead of staying Quran focused, focusing on Quran, let them fall to their historic legacies of determinism and materialism. Determinism and materialism, two strong elements that mysteriously corroded the spiritual and intellectual might of the Muslim societies. It has historic perspective. This fact has historic perspective. For the last several centuries, Iraq and Iran had been under the colonial rule of Sassanid Empire of the Persians, while the Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, and other surrounding areas were under subjugation of Byzantine Empire of the Romans. Keep it in mind, this divide. Iran, Iraq, Syria, all of them had their own distinct socio-cultural and religious legacies, which had never been compromised over the centuries. It were the charismatic personalities of Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his caliphs, the rising power of the Islamic State and its governance based on justice, equity, and merit in line with the Quranic teachings, which brought people of the conquered lands under the Islamic fold. Since they were not yet much assimilated in the Islamic tradition, and also historically, they were used to be ruled by iron hand. So, they moved their loyalties to stronger local authorities in Syria, in Kufa, in Basra, instead of staying solid to the geographically and culturally distant Islamic state of Medina, already weakened due to internal political rivalries, which were growing into rigid sects over time, negating the will of Allah. So, dear friends, the Jews, Christians, and other accomplices, supporters of the imperial powers, having lost their colonized lands after decisive defeats at Yarmouk and Al-Qadisiyah, were convinced that the Muslims cannot be defeated in the battlefield. Thus, many of them converted to Islam. But some of them, not all, some of them accepted Islam deceptively. What is deceptively? Not from their heart, while their allegiance remained with the forces against Islam, as witnessed by the proceedings of the battles of Jamal and Siffin among the Muslims. Such groups kept on designing their nefarious designs to undermine unity of the Muslims, to weaken them internally. They flared up these disputations, religious disputations, to such a high pitch that they grew into permanent sects over time. Unfortunate. The prevailing circumstances also witnessed such deceptive characters among the Muslims who accepted Islam at or after the conquest of Mecca, fearing the consequences of their decades-old hostility against the Muslims. Besides hypocrites in different garbs, in different, cover-ups, there were Muslims who were not much groomed. They were Muslims, but they were not much groomed, and their worldly lust, greed, dominated over their faith. It is mentioned in Surah Al-Hujurat, Ayat 14. Growing instabilities also encouraged former elitist forces to join hands with the said opponents for escaping the equalitarian system set by the Islamic State, which had denied them all types of uneven privileges, distinctions, and socio-economic exploitations. It let centuries-old cultural divide to show its colors once again for restoring the old elitist systems. Thus, all such groups attached their loyalties to the sects which served their interests better. This disunity not only weakened the Islamic State instantly as a direct impact, it also made deepening negative impact on other 5 major reasons of Muslims' decadence. With this accumulative effects, continuity of sectarianism has not only been weakening the Muslims as a dominating power in the world, but it also has sidelined Islam from the mainstream thought process of the modern life, as it is evident from the world scenario today. So, dear friends, a very painful dilemma, focus, note my words, a very painful dilemma of the history of mankind is the passive conduct of human majorities against oppressive and deceitful rule of the elitist exploitative minorities. Please write this sentence with golden ink and keep on reading it time and again. It will tell the story of oppression by the minorities over the majorities. Elitist groups run the show, whether it is religious sects or the political forces. They own resources and power. They employ covert or overt means as per need to further enhance their wealth and power. While the vast majorities, while the vast majorities follow them like the sheep herd, like the sheep herd, unmindful of their rights and exploitative traps laid by the evil forces of the elites. Consequential socio-economic divide between the elite minorities and the huge deprived majorities kept on deepening due to alliances of the elitist interest groups, religious groups, wealthy groups, ruling groups. In the Muslim societies too, majorities of the populations either did not take pain to identify enemies of the common good, or they opted to remain silent for petty interests or fear of the elite ruling forces. In the religious context, the sectarian elites exploit their followers by playing with their religious sentiments to serve their own vested interests. In the first instance, listen, my dear friends, especially belonging to the Muslim community. In the first instance, followers must know real identity of the religious leader, whether he is serving the interests of Islam or its enemy. It's very important. The most important interest lies in the unity of the Muslims and not splitting them apart. Union is strength is an old saying, but it is universally relevant today as well. Need of vocal majorities for just societies will be discussed in an upcoming lecture titled Silent Majorities, Their Failure in Identifying the Enemy and in Fighting Them Out. Dear friends, horrifying consequences, dreadful consequences of sectarian divide noted at battles of Jamal and Siffin are still continuing, are still present in the Muslim world today. One of several examples is the Iran-Iraq war that caused life loss of about 2 million Muslims, 20 lakh, and loss in material terms exceeded $1 trillion. $1 trillion. What is trillion? It is 1,000 billions. Had this money been spent on the well-being of the Muslim community, it would have earned the pride of greater self-reliance, prosperity, freedom, and peace in the Islamic world. Before conclusion, I may request to every sect-conscious Muslim who believes in sects to honestly ask 5 questions from his or her conscience. Not from me, not from any other scholar, from his or her own conscience, which is sitting in our heart, our inside, and act accordingly. The first question, the Quran clearly and forcefully prohibits sectarianism. Quran clearly and forcefully prohibits Sectarianism. There is no space for sectarianism. Is there any logic or reason above the Quran? This is the question. Is there any logic or reason above the Quran? Number two, what had been the consequences of sectarianism? Consequences of sectarianism in the past. Did it serve the interests of Islam or its enemies? This is second question. The third is, if the blame game could benefit no one in the past, can it benefit in future? So number fourth question is there any other solution of sectarianism except focusing on the Quranic verses and showing mutual respect and tolerance? 5 is unity or sectarianism? Unity or sectarianism? Both are mutually exclusive. Either you will go for unity or you will go for sectarianism. Which one ensures the progress of Islam and the Muslim community? You will have to think on it. Unity or sectarianism? Which one ensures the progress of Islam and the Muslim community? Dear friends, it will be your response that will make or break the future of Islam and your life here and hereafter. We conclude our discussion here, dear friends. These programs are recorded both in Urdu and English. Their videos can be watched on ideafoundation.com.pk website or its YouTube channel and Facebook. Their written versions are also available on the Idea Foundation's website. Please note code number of this program, Idea 1B or 25 or lecture number 127. All friends are requested to subscribe the Foundation's YouTube web channel for the benefit of the noble cause. Thank you friends for your participation. Allah Hafiz.